And this session is called The Ark's Lessons in Jewish Law. And what I'd like to show you just for a moment is on the screen, Shuli, who is just so multi-talented. Shuli will give us a look at the cover of our thematic commentary on the Torah that hopefully we're going to get the blueprints for very soon. And if we can just show the picture without the writing.
Can't.
Oh, you can't do that. But can we make
this? I need a little more time to find that
okay.
one. So sorry.
But I see it pretty large in front of me. And what I'd like to do today is, if you look at the top, Julie, if you can point this out,
I'm trying.
You could see this is the work of our daughter, Dina. Dina, we have another Dina, our daughter. Dina in Omer and Dina in Teaneck. Although Dina's daughter, our granddaughter, is going on Aliyah very soon and is expecting any day, God willing, she and Ezra. But if you look at it, this is an attempt to put on paper the beauty of the kruvim. I think in English, is it the cherubim? And you could see, if you could point to it, Julie, the wings are over there. And then beneath the wings are the faces, right beneath the faces. So, and one may wonder why this was the idea of the kruvim, and that's what I'd like to discuss with you. And I'd like to do it by taking a look at what we're going to be reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 25, sentence 10. Can I be heard?
Yes, yeah. I'm just going to mute everybody else so that we don't have too much background noise.
Right. Well, we're going to do what we normally do. I'll speak for about 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to open it up. So let's turn to chapter 25, sentence 10. We're going to go sentence 10 through 22. Now, often when we get to these portions, people yawn a little bit because it's about the construction of the tabernacle. Ultimately, the tabernacle becomes the temple hundreds of years later. And there's also descriptions of the objects, the appurtenances in the temple itself. So let's take a look at it, chapter 25, sentence 10, and here's what it says. Doesn't sound very exciting, but we're going to go through it, and I'm going to try to offer an interpretation. Until we get to the kruvim, we'll spend a little bit more time on that. Now, I'm looking at it at a phone, so I know for me the lettering is small, but I believe that for everyone else, lettering should be larger. Here's what it says. Ve'asu aron atzei shitim, amatayim v'chetzi arko, ve'ama v'chetzi rachbo, ve'ama v'chetzi komato. Let's take a look at the English translation. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, and 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. And then it then says in the next sentence, V'tzipita oto zahav tahor mibayit u'michutz titzapena, ve'asita alav zer zahav saviv. You shall cover it with pure gold, from within and from without shall you cover it, and you shall make on it a gold crown all around. In other words, it was a box. It was a box of acacia wood, and on the inside, it was golden, and on the outside, it was golden as well, and it gives us the particular dimensions, and it had a crown around its top. So imagine an open box. If I can face everyone. And the oral tradition tells us that the box was wood, but it wasn't plated with gold. It wasn't as if they took the gold and somehow they adhered the gold on the inside and the outside. Rather, it was the following. The ark was comprised of three boxes that fit perfectly into each other. The outer box and the inner box were gold, while the middle was wood. In other words, there was a golden box. In the golden box was placed the box of acacia wood, slightly smaller. It was perfectly fit. And in the box of acacia wood was placed a smaller, perfectly fit wooden box. And when one reads this, again, when one gets to these portions, one thinks it's boring, but actually every part of the Torah has its great, great excitement. And I think one of our challenges is to find out, what does this all mean? What does it symbolize? And I go back to what my son said to me a few months ago when we were studying together, and Dov said to me, Abba, we study the same text, and I love you, but our goals are different. I study the text, and I want to find out what the text means. You study the text, and you want to find meaning in the text. I want to say that again. The scholar says, I study the text. I want to know what it means. I'm going to the Septuagint, I'm going to the Vulgate, I'm going to all these Greek and Latin, all the way back in history. You, Abba, you give me a Rashi, you're trying to find meaning in the text. I said, Dov, that's why you're a scholar. And I'm a rabbi. I'm a theologian, a humble theologian who knows every day I learn how much I don't know. And so when I read this, I want to understand what is its message to all of us. And here's what I've come up with. Gold is inanimate. It's rigid. It's unbending. You can't bend gold. Wood grows. It has the capacity to bend with the wind. What this teaches is that, like the inner and outer gold boxes, into which, by the way, into this ark, what was placed in the ark? The 10 declarations, the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 commandments. Some say the whole of Torah. This was the receptacle of the Torah from which there is the halacha, Jewish law. What this teaches is that, like the inner and outer golden boxes, halacha, Jewish laws, has its limits. The gold represents the rigidity of the limits. But within these limits, Jewish law, like wood, has some flexibility. Imagine, for example, we just finished the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not actually a great fan of football. It really is a violent sport, but I did take a peek at the Super Bowl. And in football, you know that there are goalposts. There are these vertical lines. And if you're kicking, if you get the football between the goalposts, or like soccer, let's take soccer, it's an easier sport. If the ball goes anywhere between those goalposts, you're okay. It doesn't have to come in on a straight line. There's latitude. That's what Jewish law is. Jewish law has its parameters. It has its rigidity. And this is true not only in Orthodoxy, it is certainly true in the conservative movement. And I believe even in Reform and Reconstructionism on some level. There are barriers, there are boundaries. In other words, Jewish law is not monolithic. Within rigid guidelines, there may be different opinions, different opposite opinions. But the power of Jewish law is that two positions, even if antithetical, may be correct in the spirit of what the Talmud says in Eruvin, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both these and these are the views of the words of the living God. I'll tell you a little anecdote. I once gave a talk in the shul about the relationship between baseball and Judaism. And I said, in most sports, you score a goal by moving from point A across the field to point B. In baseball, much like Judaism, you start at home. And no matter how far you wander away, you can only score if you come back home. That's a Jewish concept. And then I continued and said, and baseball, of course I'm reading into it, is like modern orthodoxy. In what sense? Well, in modern, or what I call the modern open orthodoxy, there are foul lines. I'm sure Arnie is following this very closely. From the plate, it goes a straight line to first base, and then it goes straight out to the right field corner, the right field foul pole or fair pole. And then perpendicular from the plate, it goes to third base and to left field. Those are the parameters. Those are the goalposts. Those are the barriers. If you're foul on the first base line or on the third base line, you're not going to get your home run. It's not going to work. But in between, there are no two outfields in baseball which are identical. And I read into that. I was reading into it, again, trying to find meaning in baseball, that is saying that for me, just for the moment, Zalman, don't take this literally, because baseball is not Judaism, but I'm arguing baseball is Judaism. No matter how far you wander away from home, you can only score if you come back home. And I saw within it the way Jewish law operates in a more open orthodoxy. There are limits, but within the limits, no two outfields are the same. And by the way, tangentially, Avram Teller, blessed memory, he just jumped up, a beautiful man. And he said, in Rebbe, baseball is just like the Bayit's davening. It's just like the shul davening in my day. I said, why is it like the shul davening? And he said, very, very with a smile on his face, he said, because it takes forever. The davening takes forever. Thank God Rav Stephen has corrected that, and our davening is actually quite concise. So that is an interpretation of the boxes of the ark. The outer box is golden, the inner is golden, the in-between is wood. And we argue that what teaches us is that the gold gives it its perimeter. And if you're outside of those perimeters, you don't score any points. But the inside is wood because the wood grows, it's flexible, it bends. There is not one view on every issue. There can be two opinions, and they can be opposite opinions, and both could be correct. That's point one. Point two, let's take a look at sentence 12 of chapter 25 as we continue our study. And in sentence 12, it says, V'yatzakta lo arba tabot zahav v'natata alaba pamotav ushtei tabaot al tzalo ha'echat ushtei tabaot al tzalo ha'shenit. Let's point to where we are in sentence 12. You shall cast for it 4 rings of gold and place them on its 4 corners, 2 rings on its one side and 2 rings on its second side. And then, let's stay in the English, you shall make staves of acacia wood and cover them with gold and insert the staves in the rings on the sides of the ark with which to carry the ark. The staves, that means the sticks, shall remain in the rings of the ark. They may not be removed from it. You shall place in the ark the testimonial tablets that I shall give you. If I can face everyone. This is the second point in the construction of this ark, that aside the boxes, on its sides, were placed rings. So let's imagine two sides. On one side, there's a ring which is closer to the carrier, and then a ring a little further down, two rings on one side, two rings on the other side. And then they would take these staves, these sticks that were wood but plated. It's different. It's plated with gold, and they would stick the rings into the sides. And so I was wondering, what does that symbolize? How can I find meaning in that? On the sides of the ark were staves, poles, by which the ark was carried. These teach us, this is the suggestion, that the Torah applies to every place and in every time. In other words, the poles remained in the rings because the ark constantly moved. And that indicates that one could only understand the ark, let's visualize this, not as a stationary piece of furniture, of holy furniture, but the staves were there because it was constantly on the move, that it related to every place. It could be in one place one day, another place another day, and then we broadened it out, not only every place, but every time in history. In other words, the Torah placed into this ark, what this symbolizes is that the Torah is not stagnant, based on its biblical foundation and rabbinical input. And yes, may I say, based on your comments, the Torah, halakha, continues to evolve. By the way, that's probably the reason that if you look into the Torah, all of the holidays are given an historical significance, except for one. Passover, we're told we left Egypt. Sukkot, we lived in the booths. Shavuot in the Torah is never mentioned as the holiday when the Torah was given. Never. As a matter of fact, while dates are given to Passover and Sukkot, no date is given for the festival of Passover, for the festival of Shavuot, because the holiday of Shavuot, unlike all the other holidays, is not tied to an historical event. Nowhere is Shavuot, as I mentioned, linked to the giving of the Torah. In fact, the reason why no date is given is because Jewish law is forever being given. That's what the staves are all about. A decision rendered by the great Rabbi Feinstein or a local rabbi, or a comment that my dear Estelle makes or Tova makes, that too is part of the continuum of Torah. And so that finishes our second point. Our first point was wood in between the gold to indicate that within parameters, there's great flexibility, great latitude. Jewish law, Torah is not monolithic. The key in Torah is not only to talk, but to listen to the other view. Each view may fall within the parameters, probably does. And the second point was that the staves, the poles on the side, indicate that the ark was not stagnant. It evolved through history. It's constantly on the move and applicable whatever the place, whatever the time. And number 3, and finally, and this is where I want to get to the kruvim. So what do we have here? We have an open box, gold, wood, gold. On the side, the rings into which the poles were placed. Then the Torah tells us that a flat piece of gold was placed on the top of the ark. And on each side of that piece were the kruvim, were the cherubim. Let's take a look in the text, starting with sentence 17, chapter 25, and then we're going to go to the cover of the book. The Asita, chapter 25, sentence 17. The Asita chaporet zahav tahor. Make a cover of pure gold. And then it gives the particular dimensions. 2.5 cubits its length, and 1.5 cubits its width, because we already have the dimensions of the box, so it had to sit perfectly. And then let's take it into English. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, hammered out shall you make them from both ends of the cover. You shall make 1 cherub from the end at one side, and 1 cherub from the end of the other. From the cover shall you make the cherubim on its 2 ends. And then the cherubim shall be with wings spread upward, sheltering their cover with their wings, with their faces. And the rabbis say the faces were the faces of a child. In the end, we're all children. No matter how old we are, we're all children. Toward one another, toward the cover shall be the faces of the cherubim. So let me face everyone. So my third point is that this cover of gold was placed on top of the box, and then on the 2 ends, there were 2 cherubim. They had the face of a child. Again, we're all children. And it had the wings that were reaching out. Now let's take a look at that cover one more time, and let's just imagine we're now discussing exactly what this is all about. So on the cover, let's take a look at that, at the cherubim. You can make it larger. You could see, look at the base of the cherubim. Again, this is a paper cut, but we don't have the ark here unless you want to see where it says loving Torah is the ark. Obviously, it's not a good duplicate, but you could see like the cherubim are planted on top of some kind of base. That's the plate. And then it has wings. Can you see the wings? And then it has faces. And so I want to offer an interpretation of what this is as we're looking at this. At the top of the cover, what's called in Hebrew the kaporet, upon which were the kruvim, 2 figures with childlike faces were planted. In the end, and here we're beginning our interpretation, no matter our age, we're all children, hopefully trying to do good. The kruvim reminds the decisor of law that the halacha is meant for people, humans living in the world with all of life's highs and lows, exhilarations and pressures. There was a great genius called the Vilna Gaon, and he commented on the phrase that Torah should be emet la'amito, which means true to the truth. And so he notes that emet, truth, is knowing the law. Amito means taking into account the circumstances. A decisor of Jewish law must not only be erudite in the halachic text, but also must have an understanding of life itself, the problem at hand, if I can face everyone. And this is the way we were interpreting the Kruvim. Why does it have the face of a child? Because what is the Torah? What is Jewish philosophy? What is Jewish thought, Jewish theology? What is Jewish law? Let's talk about Jewish law. What is it? Is it a system of physics or mathematics? Like the old Coca-Cola machines, you put in a dime and then your drink comes out. Is that what it's all about? And it's all calculated. It's all a mathematical formula. Or is it a living text? It's not meant for people who are not people. It's not meant for robots. It's meant for people, taking into account the situation and the condition. The old story of the rabbi, and someone comes to him, a woman comes to him with a chicken, not sure if the chicken is kosher. And the rabbi looks at it and looks and says, as they did in those times, oh, this chicken's not kosher. The same chicken with the same problem is brought by another woman. And the rabbi looks at it and says, I think it is kosher. How could it be that a chicken with the same problem, one is kosher and one is not? Well, the story in its fullness is that one chicken was brought by a woman who was wealthy. And it was questionable. Maybe it is, maybe it wasn't. There are reasons to say it wasn't. There are reasons to say it is. But if you're in the wealthy world, so it's not kosher, buy another chicken. But if you're coming in and you're impoverished and the chicken is the last piece of food you have money for, the rabbi will be doing somersaults to find a way to say that it's kosher. That's why on top of the ark, there was the picture, a facial picture of children. Because Jewish law is not a mathematical formula. It's not inanimate. Jewish law has feelings. Jewish law takes into account what's happening in this person's life, what's happening in the family's journey of life. It takes all of that into account. And then we're told, number 4, we're still on the Kruvim. So let's turn back to chapter 25, sentence 21, and look what it says. It is there where, right from the top of the Kruvim, that I will set my meetings with you. God is speaking, and I shall speak with you from atop the cover, from between the two Kruvim. I skipped a sentence. Sentence 21. You shall place the cover of the ark from above, and into the ark shall you place the testimonial tablets that I shall give you. It is there, sentence 22, that I will set my meetings with you, and I shall speak with you from atop the cover, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony tablets, everything that I shall command you to the children of Israel. I'm almost there. If we can take a look at the cover. If we look at that cover, what this is saying is that God spoke, Shuli, let's point, from right between the Kruvim, right a little lower, right between the faces, right there. Where's my, right there, that's it. It's right from there that God spoke. And here, looking at this picture, here is what I want to share with you. And this is the interpretation of the Kruvim, the cover. This was done beautifully by my daughter, who did the paper cut. And of course, Rabbi Ezra did all the digital work. He's an absolute phenomenon, just genius. So as we pointed out, that in the center rests the Kruvim atop the ark, and this was placed in the Holy of Holies. And I want to argue, when I grew up, maybe I should face everyone on this. When I grew up, I really did grow up with rabbis who meant well, but I grew up with the philosophy that God is to be feared. God is a rigid God. God is a demanding God. And I think they missed it. I'm not arguing that at times, even in love, one has to have rules and regulations. Parents must have rules and regulations. But I didn't hear the message. I heard it from my parents, not from my teachers in the yeshivot I went to. I don't want to say anything bad. I didn't hear that what God fundamentally is a God of love. God is a God of love. And I see the wings, again, you have to use your imagination, reaching up and out to embrace, representing the intimate spousal love encounter. That's what it represents. God speaks from right under that hug, right under the hug, which reflects the intimacy. Again, it's a symbol. It's not a sign. It's a symbol. It reflects something deeper. It's the God who loves us, who embraces us like a wife embraces a husband, and a husband embraces a wife. If that love works, and is nothing like love when it works, and is nothing more complicated when it doesn't work. Precisely, the greater the heights one can reach, the greater the depths one can fall to if one falters. But that's what the wings to me represents. It represents the love of God in the Song of Songs. What does it say in the Song of Songs? God says, Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Nothing like that love. Nothing like real love. What's real love? Real love is not only that I love you. Real love is I just know very deeply that you love me. Ahavah amitit, lo rak yediyah sha'ani ohev otach, ela yediyah nafshit sha'at ohevet oti. That's the love of the embrace. That's the love of husband and wife. God speaks to us from that framework. That's the A of number 4. The A, the Aleph. God speaks with love like bride and groom embracing each other. But now open your hearts. But no matter how intense the spousal love may be, separation is possible. We are not Catholic. In Catholicism, one can't be divorced. In Judaism, divorce is very, very possible. Not that it's a picnic. It's not. The rabbis say that God gathers all the tears of those who are divorced because sometimes it's very, very difficult. But sometimes I believe it's better for people to be divorced and raise their children rather than be single parents living in the same house where they're not alone, but they're lonely. Children pick this up. That's probably worse than if they're apart. Yes, there is intense, passionate love, but there are countless cases where a divorce is given and people separate. And so, if the imagery of God's love is this passionate, intense love, what happens? What happens when there is separation? And it's not only my question, it's a question that the prophet asks. Only if you can find it, Julie. Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, chapter 3, sentence 1. In Yirmiyahu, chapter 3, sentence 1, the prophet asks, okay, God loves us. God loves us like a husband loves a wife loves a husband. It's anthropomorphic. So we have an understanding of how intense that love is. But what happens, the prophet asks, when God is abandoned by his people? When the people go off and marry someone else? Well, the prophet says it more strikingly, if the people are not faithful to God and perform acts of infidelity. What happens then if the people act in that way? What happens to the love of the wings, which represents that intense embrace? And what I want to argue is, humbly, that it is here that the figure of a child's face, as found in the cherubim, come into play. No matter our age, we're all children. And so the face, this aspect of God's love, represents the love of a father or a mother. Av harachaman, Av is the father. Rachaman from the word rechem, which means the womb. A parental love which is unilateral, which is infinite, which is unconditional and endless. It goes on and on. Yes, the love of a parent to a child, by definition, can't be as intense or passionate as spousal love. But a father is a father is a father. A mother is a mother is a mother. And even if children stray from parents or parents stray from children, one can come back. In Jewish law, if one is divorced and marries someone else, there can't be a remarriage to the original spouse. But a parent and child, that's different. A relationship that can be humanly made, which is marriage, that's humanly made, can be broken. But that which is what I call a vertical relationship, it's a blood relationship that never breaks. In my rabbinate, I have seldom seen people who divorce come back together. But I've seen many times, and this is a priority to me, when siblings fall apart, when parents and child fall apart, when they are at odds, I've seen miraculously people coming together. And so, as a final statement, let's look back at the cover, and then I want to hear what you have to say about this. If we look at the cover, look at what we're looking at. At the top, you see the wings. That is God's love. That's the love that is intense and passionate. It's spousal love. But then it is balanced by the love, the child's face, the children's face of a God who not only loves us as a spouse does, Torat lashon b'nei Adam, but like a father loves us and like a mother loves us. And that's why in this text, if we can look at the whole picture of this, if you look at this, on the right side, if you can point this out, Shuli, on the top right is a rose. And that reflects what in Song of Songs is called Kishoshana Ben Achochim. It's the love, the passionate love where we say to each other, you are like a rose amongst the thorns. That's the intense spousal love. And if we look on the bottom right, you'll see a well. And that represents in the Bible the well where Jacob sees Rachel trying to water the flock and falls in love with her right away. No more passionate love. But on the top left-hand side, you could see the hands grasping each other. Shuli, if you can point that out. And that represents where it says in the text that Abraham and Isaac, father and son, walked together to the Akedah, to Moriah, walking together, or Ruth walked with her mother-in-law, Naomi, walking together, parent and child. And on the bottom left, you could see a little bird hovering over its nest. That's parental love. A parent's love of a child has to be a love where we're not leaning on the nest, crushing the eggs, crushing our youngsters. We have to hover, protect, but not crush. Protect and give space to our children to grow as they wish to grow. So these little pieces represent these two different loves. And the imagery gently rests, all of it, amongst the soft petals, delicate vines, rustling leaves of flowering beauty, stirring feelings of our love for God and God's infinite, unconditional love for the Jewish people. Indeed, God's infinite, unconditional love for all people. You know, I think we need this. If I can face everyone, we need this more than ever. Often it's the case that Judaism, and certainly Orthodoxy, we identify our Orthodoxy by the rabbi we don't like, by the synagogue we don't care for. What we need now more than ever, more than open Orthodoxy, if I were to give an adjective, I would want to call it a loving Judaism, a loving Orthodoxy. And since I'm Orthodox, but I don't wear it on my glove hand, you know, and I'm sure you all know what I mean by that. I love all. I love the world. I want to love the world, even though it's easy to love the world. I always say it's harder to love one person than the whole world. If you love everyone, you don't have to love anyone. But to love all of humankind, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And what we need more, talking about our people, we need more love. Look at what's happening in Israel. I'm proud of the democracy. I'm proud of the protests, but let it be with civility. Let it be with love. To me, piety is not the synagogue I don't like or the rabbi I don't care for. Piety means that Judaism is uplifting, it's enriching, it feeds me with the soul, with a meditation of inner peace. That's what it's all about. That's why the book, as you know, is called Loving Torah. Loving Torah means loving is is a verb. I love Torah, and it's an adjective. And the other way, the Torah is loving more than ever. That's what we need. Yes, we need flexibility. We need parameters, but we need it. Yes, we have our parameters, but we need that flexibility of the wood and the gold. And it has to be contemporary. It has to move through the ages in all places, the staves and the rings. And it's speaking to people. It's not a mechanical system. It takes into account feelings and situations and what's unfolding in one's life, circumstances, all of that. And the kruvim, the wings of spousal love, complemented by the love of a parent to a child. And it's from there that gods speak. It's a loving God, a loving Torah, and in that spirit, recognizing that this is a real world with all of its issues, that we follow God's ways and also try to see the positive in the other, and in the spirit of God's love, so too all of us for each other. Now I want to hear your comments on
Avi, I have may I make some comments?
Sure.
Can I just see can I just make a list of whose hand is up? I see Effie. Let me just make a list in the chat after Estelle. So we have Estelle, Effie, Ted. Did I miss anybody's hands? For not Tova. Okay.
And we have 15-20 minutes, so please.
Okay, Estelle.
What you have said, Avi, is absolutely wonderful. I will say that, but I don't know if you realize, I don't mean to say anything negative, but do you realize that this great love you're talking about can only be physical? You know, God, let's face it, is not physical. how can you have the overwhelming joy of feeling of spousal love and children love and have the same thing for God, which is not there to touch or see or anything. I know as I mentioned to you before, when my son was born, my husband made this thing for me from Song of Songs where it says, "Kishashana ben hachachim ken at
Yes,
rayati ben habanot."
very
Granted,
good.
but
Beautiful.
that's a physical thing. Everything you said is wonderful and we feel it, but what we feel is physical. How can you equate this with any feeling for God, which is amorphous?
Right. As usual, Estelle, beautiful question. And rather than, although if anybody wants to comment on what Estelle said, of course, but my own sense is that the best way to feel the presence of God is not, it's not cognitive. It's something you have to experience. You have to experience it. I'll give you a moment when I felt it deeply in the Bayit, when Brother Roger came into the Bayit. Perhaps some of you were there when he came in on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And when he came in and he was singing with the SAR choir, "The Time Has Come," I can't explain it, but there's something that happened. That's the whole world of meditation, that just as we have minds, and our minds are amorphous, our ability, your brilliant ability is still to think. It's not physical. It's something beyond, to be able to put together the ideas that you're putting together. So to the soul, being in synagogue when Eli Kranzler, when he offers his Unetane Tokef, there's something that happens that is more experiential, has to be experienced. So let's move. I appreciate that, Estelle. I think Effie's up next.
I'm sorry.
Dear Effie, please. F.
Hi, I hope you hear me. Anyway, Rabbi, I also want to thank you. You were the first. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. I hear you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. Anyway, I wanted to thank you because you were the first person, consistent with what you said about the schools we went to. You were the first person, it's a bunch of years back though, who actually I heard talk about God in the context of love. And it was quite eye-opening, and it led me to study a lot of other things. So I'm greatly appreciative of that. And of course, every day, I say Ahavah Rabbah before Shema. We're deeply reminded of the love and compassion that God has for us. The second thing is, I wanted to ask you a question, which was I'm not even sure. I hear different pronunciations of the cherubim. Is that how, Rabbi? What's the best way to pronounce that?
I think keruvim. There are some words that really have no translation, and kruvim is one of them. I think kruvim.
Okay, true. So I wanted to ask you, I had read somewheres that when we turn away from God, the Truvim turn not inward, but they turn towards the Aron and away from us. Is
Yes.
there any accuracy to that, or am I misunderstanding?
No, there's great accuracy. As a matter of fact, in Sefer Breshit, in the book of Genesis, at the end of the Garden of Eden story, at the end of chapter 3, there is a discussion when Adam and Eve leave the Garden of Eden that the Kruvim were placed at the gates, and they're turning and turning as people reject. The Kruvim turn away. They're turning in such a way that there is a rejection. So that's the power of love.
Right.
The Power of love.
Rabbi, can I say something? Salman, want to say something? Can
Yes.
I say something? Salman?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
What I wanted a long time in the shul was shuls should have statues of the Caribbean. Why don't we have on the Caribbean on the Ark? Why can we replicate that? I always thought, why can we replicate that? Maybe it's not perfect, but we can still show that we weren't destroyed.
Yeah.
We'll never give up.
No, it's a great question, Salman.
What?
It's a great question.
I always see the Ark. Why don't you put Caribbean on it? Why can't we not as good as the Zelio, but we can still do something. Why does the shul have Caribbean on the Ark?
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. Some argue that the Kruvim, its holiness, it's meant only for the tabernacle, only for the temple. But it's a good question that you have. Why shouldn't there be something similar, not identical? Yeah, good point.
You have sculptors. You have artists that can do that.
Right. I appreciate that, Salman.
Huh? Well, I was asked. Nobody said every shul can have an ark and have the Caribbean. Why not? You said we're not being defeated. That the temple is not being destroyed. We'll come back.
Right. No, it's a good point. I'll mention it to Rav Stephen.
I mentioned it before a lot of times. Sure. Why would we have Caribbean on there?
Right.
Somebody could do.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Shuli, who's?
Ted is next. I'll need to unmute. Ted, you need to unmute.
Oh.
Okay. Am I heard now?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question that's it's only remotely relevant to today's discussion, which I enjoyed very much. But today I heard you refer to the 10 Commandments. Now I've heard the expression 10 commandments, 10 statements, 10 declarations. I believe that these are very particularly synonymous. So at some point in the future, I would be very happy to have some understanding of the distinction between those three descriptions. That's
right.
my question.
Ted, it's a very good point, and much of it revolves on whether that first of the 10 is a commandment. Are we commanded to believe in God? Can you command a belief? And in Hebrew, there's one Hebrew, and for the Bible, there are hundreds of translations into English. Even in English, there are so many varied, maybe not hundreds, but many, many. The Hebrew is Aseret HaDibrot, not Aseret HaMitzvot. Mitzvah means commandment. Hadibrot means the 10 statements or the 10 declarations. What exactly is the difference between statements and declarations? Okay, we'd have to spend some time on that, and those are English contributions, but the Hebrew is Aseret HaDibrot. And as we've often said, that I'm of one who believes that there is no commandment to believe in God. I don't think you can command someone to have a feeling. And for us, the mitzvah, what we do is not a result of belief in God, but it's a means through which one comes to believe in God. It's not that Shabbos, I have God and then Shabbos, but through Shabbos, going back to what Estelle said, through Shabbos, I get the feeling that's the roadway, the pathway to feel God's presence. It's very different than Christian dogma. In Christianity, If you don't believe in God, you're through. In Judaism, it doesn't quite work that way. The whole educational approach is a very different approach. But it's a great question. And maybe one day we'll do that, God willing.
Thank you.
Arnie, do not covet. There are those who understand do not covet, not as being cerebral, that is an emotion, I shouldn't covet. You can't command a feeling, but that do not covet means literally to take what the other has. So, but that deserves another discussion.
And while we're at it, a
Yes,
discussion on soul would be very relevant because my understanding is that Jews believe in mind, body, and soul.
yes,
And
yes.
if that's the case, I know what a mind and body is, but I'm not sure
Right.
about a soul.
Yeah, I would need time to prepare for that. That's a very, yeah, of course.
Tova's next when Bevan's
Okay.
had her.
In reference to what we just heard, I'll tell you about my 3-year-old great grandson when he was asked to make a wish before he blew out his birthday candles. And he said, "How do you make a wish?" Right. And so we're asking this philosophical question from the time that we're little. But,
That's terrific, Tova.
Yeah,
How do you make a wish?
That's Sally's little one. But, we humans, people, we love, but everybody expresses their love differently. And it depends on what we feel is important, what is important in our lives. And that's why people express their love in different ways. But God's love is multifaceted and it's infinite. And so he can love all over the world and all over the spectrum of human feelings and and actions. But loving Torah, I think each one has to love Torah in his own way, with his own capacities, because we're human. We can only love right in a way that is expressing what is important to us. I love that, Tova, and maybe I can interpret that in the faces of those children. There are no two faces that are identical, and the wings are all encompassing. Yes, and everybody has a different understanding, a different visual of the wings. They're different. I hope Donnie is on. Donnie Grunfeld's on, because she inspires a lot of this talk, and you all do. So thank you, Tova. That's really great.
If we have another moment, Arnie would like to say something.
Okay.
And did I miss anyone else's hands? I don't think so. Okay.
I didn't see Lance, but I'm so happy that Lance is on, because I know Lance is like so cerebrally, so bright. But first, let me hear Arnie, then maybe Lance will give a final comment. I know that this is more a talk.
So just to segue off of Tova's comment, just like we each love differently, we each encounter God differently. And I know at times, going through these last couple of years, all the challenges that I've had, and even before that, I've wrestled with this whole idea of what God is, what God does, and trying to get to the point of does God love me?
Mhm.
And at times that's a yes, and at times it's a no. And it's not necessarily based on how I'm, if I'm feeling bad, it's a no. No, it doesn't work like that. It just, it is what it is. And so, and then to step back for a minute from that comment,
Yes.
with all the talk about Jewish law, it's the way that people treat other people in
Yes.
the Bible that goes beyond where Jewish law is. So
Well,
I'm reminded of what my father used to say all the time. He would always quote Yiddish expressions with humor in various situations. And he would say, if everyone treated everyone like they were the Messiah, there would be no need for the Messiah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And there's a place even earlier in this chapter I was reading where God says to Moses, come up to my mountain and meet me there. I'm paraphrasing it. And he says, be there and I'll give you the laws and the commandments. So I was reading this book, the Kutzker said, why did he say being there? There was no need in the sentence for being there, but he wanted Moses to be Hineni, to be there in every way, to
Right.
share with him the most intimate,
Yes.
encounter.
Yes. Arnie, when you say you're correct, that may not be where Jewish law is, but it's where Jewish law should be. Jewish law should be very, very much engrossed in interpersonal relationships and guidelines as well, Arnie.
I hear that so much from you. It's a wonderful thing.
It's a challenge because I think we as humans, we not only are, but we're becoming, we're evolving, and we have a long way to go in that area. I'm not naive. I know that love is, I know there has to be rules and regulations, and there's discussions about DAs who are soft and so on and so forth. And I understand that. When I say God is a God of love, that doesn't mean that there aren't rules. What I am saying is that the idea that God predominantly, that the stress, the nekudah ha'ikronit, the main point is that our God is a God to be feared. That's where I challenge that. I think it works the other way. I think it works that ultimately God is a God of love. And I push very much that we be more ready to use the word love. I use it constantly, as some of you know. I'll never end an email or a text without saying blessings and love. Why not use the word love? Now, some would say I'm cheapening the word, but I don't mean it that way. It's something that I wish for, something that I wish could be. That's part of the hug. Part of the hug is that there should be a sense of care and yes, and love. That's why I'd like to think the bayit is different. That's why we use the term bayit. Bayit is a home, a house. And a house is not a congregation, it's a family. It's a very, very, very different concept. So, and I think you're so right. It's okay to wrestle with God, Arnie. As long as you're wrestling, it's good. If you're wrestling, it means there's a connection. The name Israel, as you know, was given to Jacob, and he's called Israel, Ki sarita Elokim, v'manashim batuchal. You wrestled, the angel says, you wrestled with me and you succeeded. The very name Israel means Yisrael is Sarita El, one who wrestles with God. That's not disrespectful. It's not a sign of I don't care. It's a sign that I do care. So Arnie, my dear Arnie, I bless you. Keep wrestling.
Avi, my Hebrew name is Yaakov. So I don't know why I wrestle so much. I'm Jacob pre-Yisrael.
Right. Well, you're a beautiful man, and I love you. And Lance, you have the last word, Lance. My Lance.
Okay, Shuli, could you please call up the cover again?
Yes, I can.
Uh-oh, Lance, am I in trouble?
No criticism
No,
of
not at
it.
all.
No criticism, though.
No,
The
that's not going to
publisher
be
won't
criticism.
allow.
Nope, it's going to be opposite. Okay, look at the word Torah. Within the word
Yes.
Torah there is the little word or from
Yes.
Orech
Yep.
Yamim.
Yes.
Orech Yamim. And what does that mean, Rav Avi?
Right, length of days.
Length of days. Now, if you go to the Catholic Bible, you will
Yes.
see it's translated in man's days, but in our Torah, it's translated as God's days.
Mhm.
And if you look at the word as that's a dog guest. If you look at the word Torah as Rav Avi has placed it here, you will see two letters on the right or in the middle. And then you go above and you will see the cherubim and God in the middle. But there's more. If you look at the second word, Ahavah, you will find Rav Avi's name there. And now what we're talking about here is what's called a steganography. Well, anyway, and what it means is a picture with hidden messages. And it's obviously it's a computer thing. But in this case, I see, and you may remember, Rav Avi, that I suggested this was also a picture of Gan Eden. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes. And what I'm saying is this picture has an infinite number of messages. Let's put it that way. This picture is what I call a hierophany, which is a manifestation of God in objects, patterns, people, whatever, pictures within the world. What you see, if you can see, is God all around us. God is here, God is there, God is everywhere. And Rav Avi, your voice, in my opinion, of course, is the voice of God.
Well, I'm not sure about that at all, but Lance, because I truly,
I agree.
It's such a small voice. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being on. And actually, the cover, as I look at it, is that Dina did and Ezra did, is so beautiful. I'm afraid after you look at the cover in this book, it's all downhill. It's all downhill. And I'm so grateful. I don't know if Ezra on? Shuli?
I don't see him.
Not yet.
I was just going to check if he's teaching today.
It says he is.
Oh, good. So I'm sure he is. He's just not on yet because he knows we tend to take a few more minutes.
We have time for another comment.
Oh, Rav Avi, I'm not sure why you're muted, but I think Judy Stieglitz would like to say something. Was that you, Judy?
Hey, it's I. Yes.
Yes.
I was thinking about the Keruvim. I can't help but think about the general picture of the Keruvim with their wings, and it's like a lesson that we should give our children their wings. So we should embrace them, and we should give them their individuality. And similarly, Hashem embraces us and still wants us to be our own individuals.
I wish I could put that in, but the publisher will not allow that, Judy, but that's beautiful. I love that imagery of the wings. We may give our children wings, but where they fly, And no matter where they fly, we have to love them. No matter what. No matter what, we have to love them. No matter what road they take. So.
Sue's hand is up. Sue Rudnick.
Of course.
Sue, but you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see. Let's see. Got it.
Yes. Okay, I just have a simple question about the picture, the cover, the cherubim. One has larger and higher wings than the other. So I'm assuming there must be a reason for the wings to be different.
Right.
And so
I think
what
it's
is the reason?
I don't, that was not purposeful, but I guess, you know, if I had to read into it too, what I would say is that I think when people love each other, that doesn't mean that they are clones of each other. Part of love is I want to help you be who you are, the best who you are, and who you are uniquely is not who I am. That's the challenge of love. The challenge of love is we love each other because we obviously, amongst other things, we share common goals, common mission, common purposes. But at the same time, Toby is not me, and I'm not Toby, and you're not Murray, and Murray's not you. You're your own independent selves, and you do all you can in Murray's life, Ahavah Shalom, that Murray should reach his full potential. And he for you, Susan, even as maybe that's the deeper meaning of Ezer Kenegdo, we help each other. In fact, we interface, but it's Kenegdo, we remain our independent selves. So the two entities who love, even passionately, are not identical. I didn't think of that until you asked the question. So I thank you, Sue, for the question. I'm not sure whether Dina had that in mind. I'm not sure.
Steve Davis has his hand up.
Please, Steve.
You're muted.
And as soon as Ezra comes, let me know.
I will.
Sure.
Rav Avi, thanks very much for the beautiful lesson this morning. I just wanted to mention that the cherubim are facing each other. That's a lesson to us from God that we, in order to understand each other, in order to speak with each other, we have to be facing each other, not facing apart from each other and not listening and not speaking to each other. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen, so much. Julie, were there any friends on from Montreal today? Do you know?
I'm from Montreal.
Oh, and your name?
Louis.
Ah, good. How are things in?
Also, Florence is from Montreal.
How are things in Montreal?
Things are good. Thank you for asking.
How are the Canadians doing?
I
They
don't
used
know
to be the best team with Boom Boom Jeffrey on. Am I pronouncing the name right? The Pocket Rocket, Rocket Rashad, but they don't seem to be doing too well now.
Yeah, I don't follow the hockey.
Really? Okay. All right. It's hard to say goodbye, but
thank you. It was wonderful. You're a very loving man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for being on. And next week we have another parsha. This one deals. The next one, clothes. So does clothes make the woman? Clothes make the man, or not? So it's all about the priestly clothes, and we have something to say about that. All my blessings, everyone. Did Ezra get on?
No, so we'll log off and he'll log on in a couple minutes for those who want to join his class. Just log back on.
But tell Ezra how much we appreciated his artwork. Very important.
Very
this never would have been were it not for Ezra. Thank you.